All right, let's talk about a critical OSHA rule that catches even the sharpest construction pros off guard: the Multi-Employer Citation Policy. If you're working on any site with more than one contractor, you absolutely need to get this, because what you don't know can and will cost you.
Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't some hypothetical classroom scenario. On a busy, shared job site, this is exactly how OSHA operates every single day.
You heard that right. You can get hit with a serious fine for a hazard that your crew had nothing to do with creating. Now, this policy gets applied most often in construction, and its guiding principle is actually pretty simple. On a multi-employer site, safety responsibility is shared. Period. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll look at how one hazard can lead to multiple fines, define the 4 key employer roles that OSHA is looking for, and then we'll walk through their 2-step process. After that, we'll cover what's really at stake and, most importantly, the defensive strategy you need to put in place.
So how in the world can multiple completely separate companies get nailed for the exact same safety violation? Let's dive into the policy itself.
What this policy really is, at its core, is OSHA's way of bringing order to the controlled chaos of a modern job site. It's designed to stop all the finger-pointing and completely shut down that age-old excuse, "Hey, that's not my problem."
To really understand your risk here, you have to learn to see your job site through OSHA's eyes. You know, when an inspector walks on site, they immediately start slotting every single employer into one of 4 distinct categories.
Okay, this one's the most obvious. Let's say your crew removes a guardrail to get some materials in, and they leave that edge wide open. Boom. Your company is the creating employer. It's as simple as that.
Now stick with me. Let's say a painting crew from a completely different company has to walk past that same unprotected edge. Well, their company has just become the exposing employer simply because their people were in the zone of danger.
Then you've got the correcting employer. This is the company that was actually responsible for installing or maintaining safety gear. You know, if their contract said they were in charge of guardrails and they failed to get it done, they're on the hook as the correcting employer.
And that brings us to the big one, the controlling employer. 9 times out of 10, this is the general contractor or the CM. In OSHA's view, you're the captain of the ship. You have the ultimate authority and responsibility to make sure the entire site is safe.
Now, I want you to zero in on that middle column for just a second. The creating, correcting, and controlling employers can all be cited, even if not a single one of their own employees ever went near the hazard. And that right there, that's the entire purpose of this policy.
Okay, so we know the roles, but how does an OSHA inspector actually use them to decide who gets a citation and who doesn't? It's not a guessing game. They follow a very clear 2-step process.
It's actually a really logical analysis. First, they look at a hazard, and they figure out which of those 4 hats you're wearing in that specific situation. Second, they decide if you actually did what you were legally supposed to do while wearing that hat.
So for all you GCs and project managers out there, this is the multi-million-dollar question. Why? Because this phrase, exercising reasonable care, it isn't just some vague guideline. It is your primary legal duty, and it's a specific standard you have to prove you've met.
So what is reasonable care? Well, OSHA's going to look at everything. How big is the project? How fast is the work moving? What's your sub's safety record like? And, most importantly, how often were you really inspecting the site? And did you have an actual working system for getting hazards fixed and fixed fast? If you can't prove you met those obligations, the fallout is serious. We're talking about a cascade of expensive consequences that go way beyond just writing a check for one fine. You see a hazard just like this one, an unguarded opening, and you might just see a single problem waiting for an accident. But in OSHA's eyes, that's not one problem. That's a liability bomb that could go off on every single contractor on that project. And this is where the real pain starts, because it multiplies. Each company can get its very own citation and its own separate penalty. That citation then dings your experience modification rate, your EMR. Suddenly, your insurance premiums shoot up. And to top it all off, you've just put a giant bullseye on your back for OSHA on all your future projects. It's a nasty domino effect. Okay, enough of the scary stuff. Let's get to the most important part of this whole conversation. How do you defend yourself? Let's talk about the concrete, actionable steps you can take to protect your company. This checklist right here, this is your blueprint for proving reasonable care. But let me be clear, this is not about creating more paperwork to sit in a binder on a shelf. This is about building a living, breathing, verifiable system.
Your documented inspections, your written notices, your correction logs, these aren't just good ideas. They are your legal defense when that inspector shows up.
And this is a big one for anyone who thinks they can just turn a blind eye. This concept comes directly from OSHA's own enforcement manual. If a hazard, like that open hole, is in plain sight, saying I didn't know about it is just not a valid excuse.
All right, before we wrap this up, let's just bust the single most dangerous myth about job site liability. This is the one that gets good companies into a whole lot of trouble.
The myth is that you can build these little walls around your scope of work and just say, not my problem. But the reality, as this policy makes crystal clear, is that on a shared work site, safety is everyone's business because OSHA makes the liability everyone's problem.
So if you remember just one thing from all this, make it this. Shared space means shared risk. The lines of responsibility on your job site are always going to overlap, and you better believe the citations will overlap too. So share this with your subs. Talk about it at your next pre-con meeting. It is so much better to have that conversation now than to have an OSHA inspector have it for you.